There was a guy standing in my yard wearing flip-flops and a neon tank top, telling me I couldn't walk down to my own damn shoreline. He pointed at the dock I built with my bare hands and said, "This is private now." Karen gave me permission. I thought he was joking, until he called the cops. Back when we first bought the place, the shoreline was a mess. I'm talking beer cans in the brush, half a rusted-out fire pit, and a dock that looked like someone gave up halfway through building it. It wasn't even attached on one side. It just sort of floated there. Amy wasn't thrilled, I'll be honest. She squinted at the mud, the weeds, the collapsed birdhouse hanging off the birch tree, and asked me if we'd just made a huge mistake. But me? I saw everything it could be. After I got hurt on the job, busted vertebrae, 6 months of rehab, couldn't lift a coffee cup without flinching, I needed something real to come back to. Not a condo, not a rental, not a hospital bed with warm jello and a curtain between me and the guy with the TV stuck on Fox News. I needed roots. That lake saved my damn mind. No exaggeration. The first morning we spent out here, Amy and I dragged lawn chairs down to the water with our coffees and just sat. Scout, who we'd just adopted from a rescue up north, rolled around in the grass like it was Christmas. I don't even remember what we talked about. Probably nothing important. But the silence felt like breathing for the first time in years. It was peace. And from that morning on, the shoreline became my project. Every board I replaced on that dock, every rock I pulled out of the mud, every time I dug my hands into the earth to shape it into something better, it was more than just property. It was like stitching myself back together, and I didn't do it for resale value or to impress the neighbors. I did it because I wanted my kid to have a place that was steady, a place we didn't have to leave when the lease ran out or the landlord decided they wanted to explore other options. That land, the 30-foot stretch from my back deck to the water, was mine. On paper, legally, sure, but also in that way where it feels yours. I built a little fire pit, put in some benches, even ran soft solar lights down the dock so we could sit out there at night. I used to fish off that dock with Bill, the old guy 2 houses over. He taught Jenna how to bait a hook without flinching. She thought he was some kind of wizard. Every summer, Jenna would make these silly little videos. She'd set up her phone on a tripod and film the lake at sunset, or Scout jumping in after sticks, or just her lying on the dock talking about whatever was on her mind. Lake talk, she called it. They weren't professional or anything, but they meant something to her. To all of us, honestly. That dock saw every version of our family, us laughing, arguing, grieving, growing. It's where Amy told me she was pregnant with Jenna, where I first taught Jenna how to swim, where Scout ran in circles so fast he once slipped off and had to dog paddle back, looking so insulted it still cracks me up. So when I say that Shoreline was ours, I don't just mean legally, I mean it's in our bones. I knew every knot in the wood, every breeze that came in from the east, every place the loons nested across the cove. And sure, technically, it's part of the HOA, but there's a clause in the deed, clear as day, that grants easement and exclusive use to our property. It's all registered, not a loophole, not a workaround. Just a little slice of sanity that belonged to us. That's why when that jackass in the tank top stood there and told me I couldn't set foot on my own dock, man, I didn't even know yet how bad it was going to get. It started small, like most bad things do. Karen came by one afternoon with one of those smiles she saves for when she's about to say something she knows you're not going to like. You ever meet someone who weaponizes friendliness? That's Karen. She's all pearls and compliments, but somehow every sentence feels like it's wrapped around a knife. She stood at the edge of my lawn, hands clasped like she was about to deliver a prayer, and said, "Daniel, hi. Just wanted to give you a heads up. My nephew Chris will be staying with me for a little while. He's between places right now, poor thing. Lost everything in a bad investment." I nodded, trying to act polite. "That sucks. Hope he's okay?" "Oh, he'll bounce back," she said, brushing it off. "Anyway, he's a big outdoors guy, loves the lake. I told him he could use the shoreline for his morning swims, just for a few weeks. I figured you wouldn't mind." Now, here's the thing. We're not talking about a public dock or some general beach area. This was my shoreline. It's literally marked off in the HOA deed as part of my lot's exclusive access. Not shared, not communal, not up for discussion. Mine. But the way she said it, I figured you wouldn't mind. Like it was already settled. Like my opinion was a technicality. I told her as casually as I could that I'd prefer if he didn't. I wasn't trying to be a jerk about it, but I also wasn't interested in waking up to some guy I'd never met doing laps 10 feet from my breakfast table. She kept smiling, but I could see it twitch a little at the corners. That smile's got tells, like a bad poker player. She said, Of course, of course. I just assumed you'd be neighborly, but I understand. It's your space. Totally. And she walked off, still smiling, waving at Scout like they were old friends. He growled, which made me feel slightly better. I figured that was the end of it. But then, a few days later, I noticed footprints. Wet ones, right up the dock and back toward the woods. The kind of deep ones you get when you've been running barefoot out of cold water. And I'm not talking about little kid feet or coyote tracks. These were full-grown man feet. Big ones. Next morning, I'm out walking Scout, and who do I see? Karen's nephew, Chris, shirtless, in board shorts, headphones on, doing push-ups on the sand like he's auditioning for a Mountain Dew commercial. He looks up, flashes me a grin, and says, "Hope it's cool I use this spot. Your dock's got the best view." I told him, straight up, that it wasn't cool, that it's not just a spot, it's my property, and he needs to respect that. He gave me that kind of lazy shrug people give when they're pretending to listen. Yeah, for sure. Karen said it was fine, though, just for a little bit. Family stuff, you know? And there it was, the tell. Karen said it was fine. I didn't get loud, didn't threaten him. I just said calmly that he needs to stay off the dock and out of my shoreline area. Then I turned around and walked back up the hill, Scout right at my heel. But I could feel it already, that itch, that tight feeling in your chest that tells you someone's just stepped over a line they weren't supposed to, and they know it, and they don't give a damn. They're daring you to stop them. Later that evening, Amy said maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe Karen didn't realize, she offered. She always tries to see the good in people. I love that about her, but I also knew Karen absolutely realized. She's the kind of person who reads the bylaws for fun. There's no way she didn't know that Shoreline was mine. So yeah, nothing blown up, no fireworks, just one barefoot jackass doing push-ups on my beach. But I felt it. That was the first move. A week or so later, I'm coming back from the hardware store, had to grab some replacement parts for the pressure washer, and there's a stack of Adirondack chairs sitting halfway down my shoreline. Bright blue, the kind you'd see outside a chain seafood restaurant. There's even a cooler wedged between two of them, like somebody's planning to tailgate at my dock. At first, I honestly thought maybe a neighbor's kids dragged them over. It wouldn't be the first time some of the younger ones got a little too comfortable wandering across yards down by the water. But then I saw the umbrella. Big, rainbow-colored, planted in the ground like a territorial flag. And the kicker? A hand-painted wooden sign that said, "Del Vecchio Beach, guests welcome." My hands were shaking, man. Not with rage, not yet. Just this tight, cold shock, like I'd stepped in something alive. I stood there for a solid minute trying to process it. Then Scout came trotting up behind me, sniffed one of the chairs, and immediately lifted his leg on it. That was the only part that made me smile. I marched straight up to Karen's house, knocked once. She opened the door like she'd been expecting me, like I was late for tea or something. "Hi, Daniel," she said, voice honey sweet. "I heard Chris got a little creative. Isn't it cute? He's trying to turn things around for himself." I told her, calmly but very directly, that putting signs and chairs on my shoreline was not creative. It was trespassing. And if she or her nephew didn't remove all of it by the next morning, I'd file a formal complaint with the HOA board and the county. She tilted her head, just slightly, like I was a stubborn child who didn't understand why cookies couldn't be dinner. "You know, Daniel," she said, "technically that shoreline falls within common access boundaries under Article 7 of the HOA guidelines, but I'm sure we can resolve this amicably." I blinked. "Karen, I've got the deed, the maps, the signed easement agreement, that shoreline's exclusive use. You've seen the documents." She just kept smiling. "Well, maybe it's time the board revisits that language. Sometimes older clauses need a little modernization." That's when I knew this wasn't just about Chris needing a place to paddleboard. This was strategic, intentional. Karen was trying to take it, piece by piece, wrap it in enough ambiguity and HOA speak that no one could tell whose it was anymore, then just claim it. Next day, I come out and there's a kayak tied to my dock. Not just any kayak, a rental, with a laminated tag zip-tied to the handle, Del Vecchio Tours, book now. I damn near popped a blood vessel. I cut the line, gently laid the kayak up on the hill, and took a photo of everything. The sign, the dock, the umbrella, the chairs, even the cooler. Amy helped me write up a formal letter to the HOA, demanding immediate removal and citing every relevant clause in the bylaws. 2 days later, I get a notice in the mail from the HOA. Not about Chris, not about the illegal business being run from my property. It was a warning letter, for me. Violation, unauthorized signage. Attached, a photo of a small, private shoreline, no trespassing. Sign I'd posted on a stake years ago. It had been there so long it had moss on it. I was being warned for my own property signage while Karen's nephew was literally using my dock as his storefront. I called the HOA office, got voicemail, left a message, no call back. That weekend I found trash left down by the fire pit, fast food wrappers, beer bottles, sunscreen tubes, a half-burned fire log lying in the sand. My own Shoreline looked like a bus stop after spring break. Jenna wouldn't even go down there anymore. She said she felt weird walking near it now. I could see it getting to her, this tight, withdrawn energy. She stopped filming her little videos, didn't even tell me why. Just quietly packed up her tripod and left it in the garage. Scout started growling any time Chris came near. That dog doesn't growl without a reason. One afternoon, I'm out trying to clean up the mess near the dock, and Chris walks right by me with a group of people, tourists maybe, laughing, carrying life jackets, acting like he's some damn park ranger. I looked at him and said, "You're not supposed to be here." He grinned like I'd just asked him to pass the salt. "Your HOA says otherwise." And then he clapped me on the back, actually touched me and said, "Come on, man, don't be that guy, just enjoy the vibe." I stood there watching them paddle out across the lake. Half my Shoreline turned into a damn launch site, and I thought, if I don't stop this now, I'll lose everything I built. Not just the dock, not just the property. I'll lose my peace, my family's space, the one thing that's felt truly ours since the fire. And in that moment, I realized what Karen was doing wasn't just sneaky. It was calculated. It was war. At first, I didn't want to escalate. I've seen where that leads. Neighbors turning into enemies, people suing over 10 feet of mulch, holiday lights becoming evidence in court cases. That's not who I am. I just wanted my peace back. So I did the most reasonable thing I could think of. I wrote a formal complaint to the HOA, printed and mailed it certified. I included photos of everything. The sign, the kayak rentals, the chairs, the tourists, even a screen grab of Chris's little beach business profile I found online. He literally had my address listed on the site as his lakefront location. A week passed. Nothing. Then I followed up with an email, copying every board member I could dig up. I kept it professional, clear, calm, no accusations, just facts. This is my property. Here are the documents proving easement. This is the activity occurring. I am requesting immediate action to stop unauthorized use. Still nothing. Just that dull silence you get when people are pretending you're not knocking at their door. So I decided to go in person. HOA board meetings were usually held in the rec center down by the tennis courts. Beige walls, bad coffee, folding chairs, and one of those squeaky ceiling fans that always sounded like it was dying. I hadn't gone in years. Amy usually went to the annual budget meeting and that was it. But now, I showed up early and sat right in the front row. Karen walked in like she was being introduced on The View. Big smile, clipboard in hand, her little army of nodding heads behind her. She clocked me immediately but didn't say a word. When it was time for community comments, I stood up, kept my voice steady, laid it all out, again. Not emotional, not aggressive, just real. I showed copies of the easement agreement, maps with parcel overlays, even a copy of the HOA's own covenants that reinforced exclusive use access. Then I showed the pictures, my dock being used for rentals, strangers leaving trash, my kid chased off from her own lake access. Karen let me finish, smiled like she was watching a child perform in a school play, and then said, "Thank you, Daniel. We appreciate your perspective." That was it. Your perspective. The board moved on to approving funds for new mailbox locks. Afterward, one of the other board members, Phil, or maybe Paul, some guy in loafers and a golf tan, pulled me aside and said, "Look, Dan, I get it. But Karen says this is temporary, just family stuff. Maybe best not to make it into a bigger thing than it is." I asked him how it could be any smaller. He said, "Just let it ride, man. These things work themselves out." Amy told me later he was the same guy who tried to ban inflatable pool toys last summer and got shouted down by a group of moms in flamingo floaties. Real spine on that one. So I went to the county, filed a report with the zoning office explaining that a commercial business was operating on residential property without a permit. I even flagged it with the township, citing shoreline impact concerns, erosion, debris, boat wake issues. I got a letter back 2 weeks later that said they'd reviewed the situation and determined it was an internal HOA matter as the shoreline was part of a deed-restricted community. I wasn't surprised. Disappointed, but not surprised. Then I talked to a lawyer. Amy had a contact through work, a woman named Melissa, sharp as a tack and not afraid of the word lawsuit. We did a consultation. She looked over my paperwork, nodded a lot, then sighed and said, "Your case is good, very good, but fighting an HOA is like digging a trench with a spoon. They'll bleed you dry on process." She told me I'd need a surveyor, a property law expert, and probably 6 months' worth of patience. At least. I was willing to do it. I said as much. But Amy? She looked at me over the kitchen table, Jenna upstairs with her headphones on, and said, "Is it worth it, Dan? I mean, I know it is, but also, what if it takes years? What if it tears us up along the way?" I didn't know how to answer that, so I tried one last thing. I went to Chris directly, knocked on the Delvecchio's door while Karen was out. Bless whatever errand got her out of that house. Chris opened the door, shirtless again, sunglasses on inside the house, like a walking cliche. I said, "Listen, man to man, you're running a business on my shoreline. It needs to stop." He laughed, literally laughed, said, "You're still on this? Dude, nobody cares about your little stretch of mud. Chill out." I told him I wasn't asking. He stepped closer and said, "You keep poking around and you'll regret it. People like you don't win against people like my aunt." That was it. The moment I realized I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion or red tape. This was theft, dressed up in smiles and bylaws and board votes behind closed doors. They were daring me to fight. I walked away. Scout was waiting for me at the edge of the yard. He looked up like he knew. And I thought, they think I'll fold. They think I'll give up because it's easier. But they forgot one thing. I've already been through hell once. This time I brought my shovel. So one night, I'm sitting out by the dock, right where the grass turns to sand. Scout's next to me, chewing on a stick he's already destroyed 3 times over. The lake's dead still. No boats, no voices. Just that low hum of bugs and the occasional splash of something that'll probably end up tangled in my fishing line next week. Amy had gone to bed early. Jenna was upstairs, half asleep with a podcast in her ears. And me? I was just sitting there, tired. Not physically tired, the kind of tired that starts in your ribs and works its way out. I'd tried everything, letters, meetings, even being the bigger person, and still, Chris was down there every morning like it was his birthright. Still trash, still rental kayaks, still smug grins and silence from the board. I started thinking maybe Amy was right. Maybe I was dragging us all through something we weren't going to win. Then Scout stood up. Not barked, not growled. Just stood up fast and stared out toward the woods that split our property from the trailhead. I followed his gaze, and I saw a flicker of light. At first, I thought it was someone's flashlight, maybe some teens sneaking down to party, but the light wasn't steady, it pulsed, then vanished, then flared again, like a phone screen turning over, like someone didn't want to be seen. Scout took off before I could stop him, so I followed, barefoot, swearing every 5 steps as twigs stabbed me in places I didn't know had nerves. We made our way through the trees toward the gravel road behind the Delvecchio's house, keeping low. There was a parked car, black SUV, lights off, idling. And standing next to it, lit up by the dome light, were 2 figures. Chris was one of them. The other was wearing a hoodie, hands full of something. Looked like a clipboard or a binder. They handed it to Chris. He opened it, flipped through a few pages, nodded, and handed them a wad of cash. I froze. My brain was still trying to assign logic to what I was seeing. My first thought was, oh, drug deal. But the more I watched, the more it didn't fit. This wasn't fast, wasn't hidden. It was too businesslike, too tidy. The person in the hoodie took something else out of the back seat, a cardboard box, and handed it to Chris. He lifted the lid, peered inside, smiled, and set it on the ground like it was made of gold. Then they got in the SUV and pulled away without a word. I stayed low until Chris disappeared around the back of his aunt's house with the box. The next morning, I walked Scout past their driveway like I didn't know a damn thing. The box, sitting in the back of his Jeep, half covered by a tarp. I walked past slow, took a peek. Inside were printed permits, county letterhead, stickers, tags, beach use certifications, vendor approvals, all with the Delvecchio Rentals name on them. But here's the thing, they were dated. Backdated. Like someone was trying to make it look like Chris had been approved long before the first kayak ever touched my dock. All clean, all very official looking, and all completely fake. I took a photo, just one, then kept walking. That night, I pulled out the binder I keep for property stuff. Old contracts, permits, warranties, everything. I flipped to the section with HOA history. There it was, a letter 2 years old, signed by Karen, requesting a zoning exemption for temporary shoreline event use that was denied by the county. It was the exact same form Chris had in the Jeep. Same formatting, same letterhead, same spacing, just with different names and dates. And that's when it hit me. Karen had done this before. Not with Chris, with another relative. A cousin or niece, I couldn't remember, but someone who tried to host yoga sessions on the community lawn. She'd tried to pass them off as HOA sanctioned. There'd been whispers, but no one pressed it. But this time, she'd learned from her mistake. This time, she faked the paper trail. This time, she was laundering the takeover through a fake business license made to look county-issued, and no one was questioning it because it looked so damn real. Except now I had proof. I had the photo. I had the old letter. I had the easement. And I had motive. She was consolidating power, laundering her nephew's business through her HOA authority, and counting on everyone else being too tired or too polite to fight it. But the wildest part? A week before all this, I'd gotten a casual email from HOA's Communications Committee about potential shoreline rezoning for unified recreational access. It was worded soft, like an invitation, like they were exploring ideas. It wasn't a question, it was a setup. They were laying the groundwork. Once enough people stopped caring, they'd vote it in. Karen would claim it was already in progress. Chris would be legit, and I'd be standing in the weeds where my dock used to be wondering what the hell happened. So yeah, that was the twist. They weren't just breaking rules, they were rewriting history. But now, I had the thread. All I had to do was pull. I didn't sleep that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Scout pacing around the bedroom like he could feel the static buzzing through me. I wasn't angry, not in the yelling kind of way. I was something colder, focused. Like when you realize the house is already on fire and you're not panicking anymore, just grabbing the extinguisher. They wanted to play this like a quiet land grab, backdated forms, fake permits, misleading emails, and a whole lot of silence. They were banking on me either giving up or exploding, and I wasn't going to do either. I wasn't going to be the guy yelling in the parking lot while they rewrote the map around me. This wasn't about shouting louder, it was about showing receipts. Next morning, I called Melissa, the lawyer Amy had put me in touch with, and told her I needed a full title history pull, including all easement filings and plat maps from the last 20 years. She didn't even ask why, just said, "Got it," like she already knew. Amy didn't say anything when I told her. She just nodded, poured me coffee, and kissed me on the shoulder. That meant everything. That little moment, that told me she was in this with me no matter how bad it got. But it wasn't going to be just paperwork. Not this time. I needed to start peeling back the entire onion. I went to visit Bill. Bill McTavish was the kind of guy who knew things because he paid attention when no one else did. We were never close, but we'd fish together. We'd swap tools. He still had my bolt cutters from when his shed door froze shut. I brought him a six-pack and asked straight up if he'd ever seen anyone on the HOA pull something like this before. Bill just chuckled. "Karen," he said, "she once tried to get a neighbor's tree classified as a safety hazard just so she could cut down a limb that blocked her lake view. That was 2 years ago. Funny thing is, she filed it under her maiden name to make it look like a separate complaint." He told me he'd seen Chris out there multiple times with a manila folder, showing it to people who walked by, pointing at the water like he was some kind of lake ambassador. Apparently, he was pitching membership packages for Del Vecchio rentals, monthly kayak passes, branded towels. I almost choked on my beer. Then Bill dropped the hammer. He still had an old HOA email chain from when Karen first got elected to the board. She'd tried pushing through a rule change about shoreline flex use. It didn't pass, but she'd saved the draft language, and Bill, being the digital pack rat he was, had printed the damn thing out, just in case. I took the papers and thanked him like he'd handed me the map to buried treasure. Back home, I laid it all out, every document, every photo, every scrap of paper. Jenna came downstairs, bleary-eyed, asked if I needed help. I told her I was fine. She ignored me and sat down anyway. Then, without saying a word, she brought me her camera. "Scout's GoPro still has stuff on it," she said, "from a couple weeks ago." Turns out, she'd clipped it on him one morning while she was filming, just for fun. The day I wasn't home, the day Chris screamed at those 2 teenage girls for walking too close to the dock. And Scout, bless him, had trotted right behind Chris's rental table while he was counting cash and talking about getting official papers soon. We watched the footage in silence. You could hear everything, see everything. Chris holding court like a king in swim trunks, talking about how his aunt was going to fix the zoning stuff and how they were taking over that shoreline anyway. His words, not mine. I copied the files to 3 separate drives. Jenna looked at me and said, "Are we going to win?" I said, "We're going to make it very hard for them to keep pretending we already lost." The next few days were a blur of calls, printouts, scans, and late-night Google Docs with Melissa. She was pulling HOA tax filings and cross-checking signature logs from the last few meetings. Turns out Karen had ratified a shoreline expansion vote that never officially happened. No minutes, no attendee list, just a note in a newsletter that said approved, which it wasn't. And then came the gift from the heavens. Victor Ruiz, HOA board member and quiet neighbor with a talent for staying out of things, showed up at my door, said he heard what was going on, said he didn't like it, said he used to work in cybersecurity for a defense contractor and had access. I didn't ask questions. An hour later, he forwarded me an email chain between Karen and the so-called vendor who created the backdated permits for Chris. The subject line? Please match to official formatting, must appear authentic. I sat there staring at it like I'd just found the murder weapon in a game of Clue. This wasn't about pushing back anymore. This wasn't a neighborly disagreement. This was a takedown. I built the plan the same way I'd rebuilt the dock, piece by piece, no shortcuts, county code violations, fraudulent documentation, bylaw abuse, conflict of interest between a board member and a commercial entity, and, the cherry on top, clear video and digital evidence of both harassment and illegal use of private land. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight dirty. I was going to show the truth so plainly, so thoroughly, that even the people who wanted to side with Karen couldn't. I wanted them to choke on her smile, let her hide behind bylaws and loopholes. I had a bonfire of receipts, and I was about to light the match. I launched the first volley with something small, subtle, just enough to rattle the cage without announcing a war. I filed a formal complaint with the county clerk's office citing unpermitted commercial activity on residential land. I attached copies of the backdated permits from Chris's Jeep. Melissa helped word it just right, nothing emotional, just very direct language about suspected falsification and unauthorized business operations. I made sure it was public record. Then I printed a few flyers, nothing fancy, black and white sheets that said, "Do you know who owns your shoreline?" Underneath, I listed quotes from HOA bylaws and a cropped screenshot of Chris's website with my address on it. I left out names. I didn't need names, just seeds. Folded them up and tucked them under porch welcome mats and mailbox flags on car windshields at the rec center. By the next HOA meeting, you could feel it in the room. The usual buzz of small talk was gone. People weren't chatting about mulch rebates or garbage pickup. They were quiet, watching, some of them watching me. Karen opened the meeting like nothing had changed. She had that pageant smile on, talking about community vision and lakefront beautification initiatives, but I could see her glance down at the packet she held a little too often. Her hand trembled when she sipped her water. It wasn't much, but it was something. Then I stood up. I didn't bring papers this time, no visual aids, no folder. I didn't need them. I said, "There's been a lot of confusion lately about shoreline access, about who owns what, who gets to use what, and how those decisions are being made. I think the community deserves clarity, so I've submitted a full report to the county. And just so no one's caught off guard, I've also shared footage of commercial activity on private property with the HOA's own legal oversight committee. That includes video evidence time-stamped with audio." I paused there. Karen shifted in her seat. "And while we're talking about transparency," I said, "I'd like to request the meeting minutes from the alleged vote approving the Shoreline rezoning initiative, the one mentioned in last month's newsletter. I'd like to see who voted and when." Dead silence. Karen opened her mouth, probably to say something about confidentiality or process, but Victor, God bless him, beat her to it. "There was no vote," he said, loud and clear. "I checked the archive. No minutes, no sign-in sheet, nothing's on record." A few people in the room murmured. A couple turned to look at Karen, and still, she smiled. She leaned into the mic and said with perfect control, "We'll look into that and issue clarification at the next meeting." I nodded, sat down, and watched her shoulders sink by a half-inch. She knew. And now, so did everyone else. The next few days, things moved fast. Chris stopped showing up at the dock. The kayak signs disappeared overnight. The rental listing online quietly changed its location to some vague lakeside access point without an address. Someone, probably Karen, deleted the social media page entirely, but they weren't going to go quietly. That's not how people like them operate. They're used to winning by attrition, outlasting, outlawyering. So when I got a letter taped to my door from the HOA citing me for creating community unrest through unauthorized distribution of printed materials, I knew we were back in it. Melissa just laughed when I showed her. "Good," she said. "That means they're flailing." She fired off a cease and desist, citing harassment and retaliation, and added a request for full financial disclosure of all HOA board-approved shoreline initiatives over the last fiscal year. The wording was sharp enough to slice through drywall. Then came the email leak. Not from me. Not from Victor. From someone anonymous. But thorough. The entire neighborhood got an email from a throwaway Gmail account with the subject line, "Shoreline Records, decide for yourself." Inside, PDFs of the fake permits, the photos, the GoPro footage, and the scanned copy of the denied zoning request from 2 years ago. Every single nail in the coffin, out in the open. That night, Karen called an emergency board session, closed to the public, but I didn't need to be in the room to know what was happening. I just sat on the dock with Scout, watched the water, and waited. Chris packed up 2 days later. I watched him load his Jeep with those dumb blue chairs and the faded rental sign and drive off without saying a word to anyone. He didn't even look in my direction, just peeled out and vanished. Karen didn't show her face for a week. No meetings, no community walks, no HOA updates. When she finally sent out a statement, it was the most sterile, passive non-apology I'd ever read. Something about miscommunications and unauthorized use of materials and a commitment to reviewing internal processes. But it didn't matter. The armor cracked. The mask slipped. The neighbors saw it. They saw me stand up and fight back, not with drama, not with yelling, but with truth, with evidence, with sheer, boring, relentless fact. And suddenly the woman who used to run the board like a queen on a throne? She was just Karen again. Just a neighbor with too many skeletons and not enough places left to bury them. It all came to a head on a warm, too quiet Thursday evening at a special session HOA meeting Karen had scheduled at the last minute. No explanation, just one of those vague little subject lines in the email. Community cohesion and governance clarity. Whatever the hell that meant. But people showed up. A lot more than usual. Not just the usual mix of retirees and busybodies either. Families came. People I hadn't seen at a meeting in years. Someone even brought snacks, like it was going to be a block party and not a slow-motion collapse. I didn't plan to speak. I'd already said what I needed to. Everything was already moving. The county had opened an inquiry. The HOA Oversight Committee had requested a third-party audit. Karen was wobbling. I figured I'd just sit in the back, arms crossed, and watch the walls close in. But then she started talking. She stood at the front like nothing had happened, like this wasn't the slow-motion unmasking of every lie she'd been spinning for months. Her hair perfect, her voice smooth, her tone dripping with that patient condescension she always used when she thought everyone else in the room was dumber than her. She talked about misunderstandings and confusion around Shoreline guidelines and how she regretted any distress caused by recent events. She never said Chris's name, never admitted a thing. Just weaved this soft little narrative where she'd tried her best and been tragically misunderstood. And then she said it. She said, "We must remember, this community functions on trust. We cannot allow one individual's personal vendetta to derail our shared vision." I looked up. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Her eyes scanned the room and stopped right on me just for a second, and it was enough. And I swear, in that moment, I heard something click in the room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But you could feel it, this ripple of nope, like the whole crowd had finally had enough of being talked to like kids who didn't know better. Then Leah, quiet Leah Benson, single mom Leah, always polite, always sitting in the back row, stood up. She held up a printout, one of the emails from Karen to the vendor faking the permits. She said, "I got this in the leak. My kid was screamed at by Chris while she was trying to wade in the water, and you said it was all a misunderstanding? That's not a misunderstanding, that's fraud." Silence. Then Victor stood up. Said, "I was on the board. I never saw a vote. Karen, you pushed it through in a newsletter and hoped no one noticed. And when people did notice, you tried to bury it." And then came the flood. People started talking over each other, not angry shouting, just this low rumble of voices finally pouring out everything they'd held back. Complaints, warnings, photos. One guy said Chris threatened to fine him for walking his dog near the dock. A teenager said he was told by Chris that the fire pit on my land was unsafe and off limits. Another woman had a letter from Karen scolding her for unregistered kayak usage, which turned out to be her kid's inflatable paddleboard. Karen tried to regain control, tapped the mic, raised her hand, called for order. But the room wasn't interested in order anymore. They were interested in truth. And then someone, I don't even know who, said it out loud. "We want a vote of no confidence." Karen froze. There it was, the words she couldn't charm her way around. She tried to pivot, said there were protocols that the board needed time to review, that we should be careful not to act on emotion. But she was done. Her power didn't live in the rules. It lived in silence. And the silence was gone. An interim vote was scheduled right there, on the spot, by board consensus. And me? I didn't have to say a thing. Didn't have to stand or wave documents or play the hero. I just sat there, watched the tide turn, and felt, for the first time in months, that the ground under me was mine again. Jenna reached over and squeezed my hand. She didn't say anything either. She didn't have to. We both knew what this meant. The truth was out, not whispered, not buried in subtext. Spoken, heard, Confirmed. Karen was finished. Chris was gone. And that shoreline? Still mine. It's funny how quickly things settle once the noise dies down. The dock's quiet again. No rental kayaks, no strangers with Bluetooth speakers, no laminated Del Vecchio beach signs fluttering in the breeze like discount coupons. Just the creak of the boards under Scout's paws and the soft lap of water against the rocks. The way it was always supposed to be. Karen stepped down a few weeks after the vote. Officially, she cited health reasons and a desire to focus on family. Unofficially, I think she just couldn't stand the idea of not being in charge. She hasn't been to a single HOA meeting since. Rumor is she's trying to sell, but her name still shows up in the directory and her porch light's still on most nights. Chris vanished like a puff of cheap cologne. No one saw the Jeep after that last drive down the hill. Jenna joked that he probably moved to some other lake and started selling jet ski timeshares. I didn't ask around. Didn't care. What mattered was that the fire pits lit again. We had a few neighbors over not long ago. Bill brought hot dogs, Leah made a pasta salad that probably could have fed 3 families, and Victor, surprisingly, showed up with 2 six-packs and a Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock. Jenna set her tripod back up at the end of the dock just like she used to and filmed the water as it caught the last of the sun. That was the moment it hit me. Not during the vote, not when Chris packed up, not even when I got the official county letter affirming my easement rights. Right then. Watching my kids smile again by the water, watching Amy laugh with Leah like they hadn't been in survival mode for months. That's when I felt it. Peace. I'd fought tooth and nail to keep this place. This stretch of land, these boards under my feet, this damn fire pit and the crooked birdhouse hanging off the birch tree. And now, it's mine again. Not because of a deed, but because we held on. Because we didn't let them push us out, gaslight us, wear us down. You know what's wild? I'm grateful for it now. Not for the fight, not for the stress, not for Karen's smug little smirks or the passive-aggressive letters taped to my door, but for what it taught me, for what it reminded me, that you don't have to be loud to be right. You don't have to shout to hold your ground. Sometimes you just have to stay standing when everyone else is hoping you'll sit down. Scout's lying at my feet now, chewing on a pine cone like it owes him money. Amy's inside, probably making tea. Jenna's editing one of her videos upstairs. And me? I'm watching the water. Same view, same piece. Except this time, I know exactly what it cost. And I'd pay it again, every damn penny.